Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, July 20th special school committee meeting scheduled for 5 o'clock tonight in the Gala meeting room. I'd like to open this meeting now. Thank you. Any motions to go to executive session?
I'd like to move that we enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing wage contract negotiations for non-union personnel, the superintendent.
Second on that motion?
I think we just need to take a roll call vote.
We can just take a roll call vote. Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Michelle, yay.
Michelle, yay?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Rob? Aye. Great. So we'll move to executive session at this time, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the full committee meeting of the School Committee of Foxborough. We are back to our agenda as listed. A little bit longer, a little bit later timing, so we'll get back on time somehow here for everyone. Welcome, everyone, joining us. Brent, too, as well. Wasn't here earlier, but thank you, Brent, making it in. Next on the agenda is the superintendent's contract and evaluation. We have all school committee members, all members of the school committee for last year evaluated the superintendent and has met with the superintendent about that evaluation, but we've also summarized that here. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the evaluation for the superintendent, how it was summarized. The standard evaluation for the superintendent involves progress toward her own goals that she has established with this school committee, the school committee last year. Each of the members rates her on those established goals. Then the committee also rates her on the 4 state-determined standards. This is all standard boilerplate evaluation of the superintendent done by every superintendent in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And then at the conclusion of that is an overall summative rating by the school committee members. So I'd like you to know that the school committee rated the superintendent proficient as an overall rating for last school year. So thank you very much. A couple of the comments, I just want to highlight 3 of the comments that were articulated by the school committee. First is Dr. Bertos has continued to set the standard for the Foxborough Public Schools with consistent focus on equity in learning, professional development for administrators and educators in the district, strong collaboration with the school leads and individual teachers, connection with students, parents and guardians in the community, and sound financial management. Another comment by a member was that she has done an excellent job in improving social and emotional learning of students with programs such as Responsive Classroom, which she presented at the new superintendent's induction program, including our data on equity and meeting the needs of all students. And without reservation, another comment, without reservation, Dr. Bertos leads the culture and climate of the Foxborough Public Schools through her energy and attention to the educational environment. A school culture and climate is a strong contributing factor to the academic success of students. The dedication of the faculty, which is an outgrowth of leadership from the superintendent through her building administrators, is also a very influential component of academic success. We presented that composite to the superintendent, so she has that as well. I'd like to mention the discussion, state the discussion about her contract. So at this point, we have to move into a new contract for the superintendent annually, right about this time. So what we have put together as a contract would be a 5-year contract beginning on July 1st, 2021, and extending to June 30th, 2026 as a 5-year contract. And that would be the 5-year length of the contract beginning at the conclusion of this current one. Also, as part of the annual meeting of the school committee is the annual payment for the superintendent and her total compensation for the year, which is done annually. And so the annual compensation has been recommended as 2.75% increase in base, adding a $1,000 longevity clause for service over 10 years, which is clearly a unique an opportunity for this school committee to recognize the long-term commitment of Dr. Bertos in serving this community and recognizing that. Also in the contract for the superintendent is a $2,200 annual car allowance and also $150 per month cell phone annual reimbursement, or cell phone monthly reimbursement for $1,800 annually. Total compensation for the contract will be $197,550. $197,550.
So I think we need 2 motions. Mr. Chair, so the first would be to approve her total compensation.
Correct.
Dr. Bertis' total compensation for the 2020-2021 school year of $197,550.
Correct. So that'll be one motion, which is the,
I'm going to make that motion.
I'll second.
by Mr. Canfield. Any further discussion about the compensation for the 2021 school year? All in favor? Thank you. And now the second motion is for the term of the contract, which picks up at the end of this current
I
contract.
would like to make a motion that we approve her term of, Dr. Bertis' future term of contract from 2021 through
26.
2026. Yes, yeah, that is.
Second by Mr. Rutter. Any further discussions? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you very much. And the final thing I'll just say is that this vote today is for our hope for your future with us and the future of the school system, and support your ability to transform this district to the future and a commitment to our town. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda is open public comment. And I'd like to start with a email that we received. Since whatever date that was, we've been in this COVID mode. We've read whatever the community inbox was. So we did have a community inbox from B.B. Simone of 2 Cherry Tree Lane. And the comment was, I think having an open forum with the parents and the school committee is a good idea. I know I have many questions and concerns, like I'm sure many parents do, on what school is going to be like in September. If we have any chance to ask questions to the board and speak about our concerns, it'll help ease everybody's minds on the reopening of the school year. A meeting at the high school auditorium could hold everyone. Please consider this. Also, I'm sure you're considering this, but you have to consider having the remote learning available for those that aren't comfortable about returning and for those who are sick and can still participate remotely. So that was the only community inbox we had. Is there anyone here for open public comment?
I have one question.
Sure. If you would, thank you. Yeah, name and.
Yep, Lynn Davis, 17 Granite, parent. And I just had a question in follow-up to the survey that came out recently. There was a question about Wi-Fi availability at the residence, which is great, we need to know. But I noted in the last committee meeting, one of the things that was raised is that although many families have Wi-Fi, their bandwidth and their latency capacity may be at issue. And I didn't see any clarifying questions related to that, which I think is a piece of information we want to know, so that if we want to lobby with Comcast and Fios to enhance capacity for those families that are underserved, or provide hotspots or things like that to enhance the capacity in the home when multiple people are on at once. So I'm curious what the position is so that we can address that before it comes up.
So it's hard for us to basically say that you have to have, you know, a certain bandwidth or speed, because again, not knowing what you're running in your house, you know, a parent might have a very high speed, high required piece of equipment that they're dealing with to work their business. So really it has to be a conversation, unfortunately, between the family and whether it's Comcast or Verizon, explaining what your equipment is. Ours is just, you know, it would be like if you had a conversation with them, you'd say, like, if I was streaming Netflix, okay, what does one device need? What does 5 devices need? So depending on how many devices you have and things like that, that's effectively what we're asking, because if we're going to do any type of, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, we're acting almost like a video transmission.
Right.
So, and again, I don't know if you would have 2 students in your house that would be on and nobody else, or, you know, do you have 2 students and 2 parents that are both working that time?
That's exactly my point. The question was asked, do you have Wi-Fi or no? Whereas more so, the question could be.
That was actually, the reason that question was actually asked was different than how good is your Wi-Fi. It was, do we have people in town who have no Wi-Fi? In which case we have a problem, because we need to obviously figure out a way to be able to have those students also involved.
Sure, so I would recommend asking the follow-on question too of, do you have capacity issues in your home based on what your home utilization is, so that we can address those before we're back in the off chance we're remote again, so that we can get in front of it and encourage them, give them the tools and information to try to negotiate with Comcast and Fios, and/or us as the school committee or the school department procure hotspots to enhance their capabilities at the homes. I just want to prevent any roadblocks from us being able to successfully push forward the remote learning and the video capabilities.
So would you agree, it's really not a questionnaire, it's probably more us putting out a thing to the families, saying that they need to have an analysis done based on what they are planning to use, assuming ours is a video product?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume most families know if their kids are complaining, oh, my Xbox is lagging, or if I'm trying to get on a work Zoom and everybody else is on a device and I'm lagging. We all know if we have weaknesses in our home tech infrastructure. So I felt like that follow-on question could have been asked, what would give you information to be able to either help families that need it and lead them to working with their carriers to get up if they can, and/or if we need to provide other resources for them, because there are other ways to enhance Wi-Fi and internet capabilities at the home.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and received. Thank you very much. Seeing no one else for public comment. Next on the agenda, we're making up time, is the update of the reentry plans for the fall of 2020. Dr.
We
Burgos.
actually have a couple minutes to
Oh.
approve before we move on. I'm sorry,
I thought you were
Richard.
making up.
I was just trying to jumping things. I'm sorry.
But we're going to go fast with the minutes, I'm sure.
I was, so approval of minutes, everyone, please. You were sent the minutes. Jeez, skipped right over it. Any comments?
So I have no comments on the June 22nd, 2020 regular meeting minutes.
Yes?
I would like to make a motion to approve them as presented.
Motion by Tina. Second? Michelle? Any further discussion? All in favor of the June 22nd minutes? And abstentions? 401. And that's it.
We have the executive session.
Oh, the executive
minutes.
session minutes, thank you. Executive session minutes, thank you.
The only change I had on those is actually, I think it should say Rob Canfield, clerk, under respectfully submitted.
You're right.
With that one change, I would make a motion to approve the executive session minutes from June 22nd, 2020.
Thank you. Second? Again, Michelle? Anything for any further discussion? All in favor of the executive session minutes? Raise your hand. Abstentions? 401.
I would make a motion to release the executive session minutes from June 22nd, 2020.
A second to release the executive session minutes? Again, Michelle? All in favor? 5-0. I think that's it now, right?
That's it.
That's it.
Now we can move on.
Go to
We
the-
made it through the minutes, so it didn't take much time. Okay, please, reentry plans update, Dr. Burtis.
Okay, so what I'm going to provide is really that 30,000-foot view of an update right now, because there are still, which we understand is very frustrating, and I don't think that there's anyone that's more frustrating than the school departments across the Commonwealth right now with trying to plan for the reentry of school, with waiting on so many factors and unknowns. But at the same time, we are planning based on one comprehensive plan. But what I would say, which is most important, is that it's the health, safety, and well-being of our students and our faculty and our staff that are our number one priority, and the decisions that we're making are based on that first and foremost. As we plan for the fall and looking at what we've received from the state level, the plan itself needs to have 3 components, and I will talk a little bit about that, but need people to really be patient as that plan is due to the Department of Ed the 31st of July, and not making any decisions and sending those to the Department of Ed until August the 10th. So as you can imagine, we have been meeting constantly every single day with our steering committee and our multiple subcommittees in order to plan for the reopening of school. So in part of that back to school plan and the collaboration with all of these different subcommittees, they focus on all different aspects, from very technical aspects to more of the teaching and learning with those. So at this point in time, the guidance that we're working with is what the Department of Ed is still considering initial, and we're waiting on finalized guidance, but we're full steam ahead as far as planning. And that work in progress constitutes what the Department of Ed is really pushing for, which is the priority to get as many students back in school as possible, safely, of course. But that is the goal, to have them back for in-person learning. We know that the learning that took place, as we've talked about the emergency learning from last spring, students need to be in the brick and mortar school. It's for social emotional reasons, for the academic reasons, being able to address learning loss that has taken place during that time, be able to accelerate those gaps and to remediate and to work with our students to have them back with their current grade level and learning standards. So we're planning for an in-person plan as that being the ultimate goal, but at the same time we have to have a hybrid learning model, which is part in-person and part remote. What does that mean? That means teachers are obviously full teaching. They would have a cohort of students, like if you were to think of them as cohort A or cohort B. A hybrid model in discussion, that is I'm sure people can appreciate the challenge. It's the most difficult model to plan for. And we also know going into it, you're not going to make everyone happy. There's not any way to. So discussions of whether that A and B cohort, some discussions are, is that a week on and a week off? We've talked at length and will continue as we plan in these 2 weeks. Is that the best model, or is it where you're splitting the week and you're not having students out for as long and then having transition? When you think about transitions out, even after a week of February break or April break, bringing students back after they've been out for a full week, that reentry into school and the constant transitions, there's a lot of challenges there. There's the discussion of whether it were a half day. Some students were in the morning, some were in the afternoon. There's pros and cons to that as well. If it's a split week, if you're there full days, but you're there 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and then you flip that, but everyone is in every single week. We also understand the challenges this poses for families, particularly those when we think of childcare and teachers that teach in other districts. And that's the other challenge, quite honestly, and we're in conversation with districts around us, because if we're able to have hybrid models, if we're in a hybrid model that is consistent, then that makes a difference for planning with families as well, not just with our own faculty and staff. So I don't have an answer on what a hybrid model would look like. I can tell you we're in full discussion about that, really weighing the pros and cons of what each model will look like. In the end, regardless of which plan it is, school committee will need to vote on our plan that's due by August 10th. So that is something that we'll need to talk about a little bit more. And then the third model is the full remote learning. We have to expect that we could be at any time completely remote. Again, particularly if we come back to school and we have any kind of positive cases. On Friday night, the Department of Ed released a very long document with all of the protocols, scenarios, procedures, which was really good, very helpful. Met with the Board of Health this morning and with our wellness subcommittee and looking at that. What happens if someone is symptomatic? What do we do as a classroom, as a school, as a district? So all of that is very much spelled out. So we will be following, obviously, all of those procedures and protocols, and that is something that will be very much in our vernacular as we go forward. So those are the three models. The model that we will end up with when we actually return to school, it is a question mark. There's no way to say that it's not. We're really looking at the data that's coming from the state level. It's also contextual, looking in Foxborough and what our numbers are. I can tell you from meeting with the Board of Health and Deputy Chief Tom Kenvin this morning, in Foxborough since March, we've had 125 cases total. Right now we have 8. That's what shared this morning. So we're very different in our community as another community could be. So context is really important with our plan, but absolutely, the safety of our students, faculty, and staff is paramount. So what we've been doing now is a feasibility study and looking at the guidelines. So you've heard from the CDC, we see it everywhere we go, 6-foot distancing for social distancing is what we've become used to. But at the same time, the Department of Ed, with all of their working groups and all of the health fields and the people that are informing what comes from them, in combination of 6 foot is really what's preferred, but with a 3-foot minimum, if you're wearing in combination, it really, you have to have the other pieces, wearing a mask. It's required for students in grades 2 and above. It's recommended for K-1 students. Hand washing, staying home when you're sick, and then obviously, watching for symptoms. So that, they're saying that you can be with 3 feet. So as part of our feasibility study, we've gone through every classroom, and we've looked at measuring to see what, they're talking seat edge to seat edge for 3 feet. We do exceed the 3 feet if we have all of our students in our classroom by a number of things. We've had to purchase furniture. So where we had tables in classrooms, we've had to take, or taking the tables out, we've purchased desks because they need to all be facing the same direction and to be seat to seat 3 feet. But once you have the desk, it ends up being more than that. It's not 6 feet. But it is more than the 3 feet. We've had to identify classrooms to move certain classrooms. I can tell you certain classrooms as an example at the IGO by moving. We have a couple of classrooms that are just physically smaller than others, but we have the space to be able to move into another space. We're looking at utilizing larger spaces. So when we think about the high school, and if we have some of our elective courses have a larger number of students, but we can go to larger spaces such as whether it's the media center or it's the auditorium or it's room 122, like we're identifying all of these different spaces. So this is a lot of work with our feasibility study. In addition to purchasing desk versus tables, it's moving. It's really kind of repurposing the tables that were in certain rooms. Our kindergarten rooms, as an example, you can have the tables in there and easily space out the students because we have really good class sizes in Foxborough and we're able to do that. Cohorting of students is another priority. We want to minimize the movement of students. So at the elementary level and at the middle school level, particularly up until 7th grade, we would have our specials on carts. So the teacher goes to the classroom of students. Okay. When we think about our 5th and 6th grade as an example, where they just flip-flop between two, we can have the teacher move instead of the students move. We're looking at all of the signage to go. You see about the social distancing circles, to have one-way directions, to be able to have the movement in the same direction. As an example, a very lengthy conversation with the Board of Health this morning was talking about, we know that it's 10 to 15 minutes in proximity. So the question, can we have students at the high school level, because you can't cohort them like you can at the elementary level. You're going to have movement in a high school. But when you have on a mask and you're just passing, and we would still have signage as far as, you're on one side of the hallway or the other, that's fine because you're just passing. It's the same thing if you needed to go to a locker. Questions about going to the bathroom. You're in the bathroom, you're out. So those kinds of things you can do because it's not congregating in areas. So I use those as examples because that's down in the weeds to the planning of all of the safety precautions. And when you ask questions, the more questions you get into, then you dig even further and ask some that we hadn't thought about necessarily. So that's really the having all those stakeholders and all those subcommittees is so important because someone else's perspective will be brought up with a question that we didn't think about before. So again, really tight collaboration, meeting weekly with the Board of Health, looking at signage in our buildings, following all the safety protocols, ordering the PPE for students. So students would be asked as part of your back to school supplies to come in with a mask, but we have oodles of masks, thanks to the facilities, ordering those ahead of time and really getting out. We've heard some school districts that are waiting. We're not. We have it on site. as far as the PPE, the cleaning supplies, the electrostatic machines as far as cleaning, to be able to clean buses between every run. All of those resources, equipment, materials, we already have on site to be able to follow all of those safety protocols and procedures and do even more cleaning, as an example.
Don't forget all the hand sanitizer that we have.
And we have lots of hand sanitizer, because those are all going to be strategically placed around buildings in every single classroom. And our youngest students are already used to coming in and hand sanitizing anyway, and being able to, before in and out. All of the training for staff and all of these procedures and protocols, all that training will take place, spending a lot of time with bus drivers, anyone that works for us. We mandatory training of what are all those procedures and protocols to follow. And then before I go to the kind of the academics, curriculum, teaching and learning, and we'll get to transportation and cafeteria too, because those are our challenges. I will say with social distancing, those are our two areas of challenges. But as far as the facilities standpoint, Bill, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think you covered most of it. I think again, we're having to obviously look at our staffing as to how we will organize the custodial staff differently than what we do today. Today, our current protocol is to have a custodian on in the building during the day, and then the bulk of our custodians at night to do the cleaning. Obviously, if we're going to be going through bathrooms multiple times a day and doing things, we'd have to have additional custodial help during the day. So we're looking at how we're going to reorganize those schedules to make that work as well. Amy did comment on the buses, but we basically put equipment in each bus so that each bus driver can, between runs, actually do a disinfectant swipe through the bus itself. But again, our biggest one that we were able to get equipment on early, our orders in early, was on the electrostatic machines that can go through buildings. And at this point, we own 9 of those machines that are the handhelds, and we own 2 very large backpack units. So we can go through all of our buildings on a nightly basis. We have all the chemicals to back that up, and we're very comfortable with that at this point. So I think to Amy's point, we were fortunate into placing most of our orders very early on. Matter of fact, I will credit both Carl and Tony with the fact that they placed orders with every single one of our vendors. And then we saw how things were developing, we got the orders out there. So it was kind of good. We got multiple units from each vendor. We were able, pricing was all the same for the most part. But as each one of them got a few items, we were able to get those in versus putting all of our eggs in one basket. So it did work out pretty well for us.
And then to go to the cafeteria and transportation. So when we think from a facility standpoint and the minimum of 3 feet distancing and 6 feet if you don't have a mask on. So in order to have all of our students in a cafeteria, you have to take your mask off to eat. And that's why it has to be 6 foot separation. When we look at our tables currently, we have 5 foot circle tables in the cafeteria. So we've also identified other tables and counted them, and if we get the rectangle tables in there and we start to split lunches, if we have some eating in classes, but then if you think about if you do not have 6 feet of distancing in a classroom and you take off your mask, then you can't then eat in a classroom unless you have every other row in a classroom staggered eating to take their mask off. So that's how much you have to really drill down into this. So the cafeteria piece, we're working on it and figuring that out to be able to make that work, but it's really, really challenging. The bigger challenge, I think is probably the biggest right now, is transportation, because it is 3 feet. Everyone, kindergartners and first graders included, have to wear a mask on the bus. But in order to have 3 feet of distancing on a bus, you're looking at 27 students on a bus. So the transportation survey that was sent out on Thursday, really high participation rate on that. That survey, I will also just like to make a comment. We use School Messenger for that, deploying that survey. And the reason is because it tags it back to student ID. And when we use that, we can see directly if we're getting all of our students to be able to really plan well. And at the same time, by using that, it's imperfect. So I had a number of emails that the survey had expired. We fixed that, but that is the reason. The survey that was sent out the next day, which was more on your intent to send your child back to school, we use Microsoft Forms. So it didn't have that particular issue, but we were really trying to go back by student ID with the transportation survey. But high participation rate, but I can tell you out of, so we had on average 80% participation rate by grade level for the transportation survey, but we have it was like either 66% or 64% on every single grade level that said they would be taking the bus. At those numbers, you can't have 3 tiers and have 3 feet of distancing and have every rider on the bus. So that's a challenge right now. So one of the things that we've been looking at is students who ride the bus. So Bill, I'll turn it over to you because I know you've done a lot of work on that.
So basically our transportation department took our software and ran our normal routing system, which would take the students, all the students that would be registered for next year. And we currently use what I'll call loosely as the 1 mile rule, and that is that you have to be at least a mile to take transportation. There are sections of town that we do less than a mile for concerns of the road congestion in some of those areas. But if you use that 1 mile radius, we're running an average on our elementary level of about 50, 55 kids on a bus. On the middle school, we're running an average of about 45 to 50, and on the high school, we're in that 50 range. Now, the only difference is on the high school, we drop down. We don't run as many buses because we have more people to drive and things of that nature. But so obviously, you could continue and pay more and bring more drivers on to run a third route and to be able to bring those numbers down. But the only way we get to the 26 to 27 students on a bus is to go to the 2 mile radius, and it does work. So what that obviously creates is a hardship for families that would be currently taking a bus that would not be allowed to take a bus under the 2 mile radius. But that is literally the only way. There have been a number of things put out there. I mean, the private busing companies are in no better position than we are because they can't hire more drivers and they can't get more buses. So one of the concepts that I've heard by a number of my conspirators relative to business managers is that the big bus companies are basically saying they'll double tier every single run. Well, the reality is you'll never get the kids to school on time. You can't, bring your first high school level in a half hour early and then the second one get there on time and then try to make it to the middle school and do 2 sets of runs and then try to do the elementary on 2 sets of runs for every single route. It just won't work. It's nearly impossible. So there are very limited options when it comes to transportation on ways to make it work. And unfortunately, the one thing is if you do follow the law, it does seem to work in Foxborough. It won't work in every district, but it would work in Foxborough. But it does have a cost to families, and that is that anybody within that 2 mile radius would be responsible for getting their child to the school building that their child's going to.
So the law is 2 miles, but we've been doing a mile.
We've been doing a mile. Yeah.
I think there was Tina had a question.
You know what, my questions are not related to this, so if we could circle back to my questions after we're through this discussion, I'd appreciate it, but.
Thank you.
I'm sure you guys have thought about this already, but my question with that is if parents are then going to be driving their kids to school, that's going to
Increased
cause a
traffic.
congestion issue. So most likely still some kids are going to be coming early. I know with the middle school specifically, they don't open the doors, or they haven't in the past. So is that something that will likely have to, all of that type of stuff is going
Having
to
to look at
change?
all of the scheduling entry. The same thing happens at the high school. I mean, even the number of students that arrive at 7 a.m. and the supervision, which we have, but it would have to look differently
Right.
in what we're living through right now. So absolutely, we're having all of those discussions as well. I mean, to the point when we talk about our crossing guards and even thinking about public safety and what that looks like, the implications there.
Yeah, I think that from a parent's perspective, having that information earlier on is helpful because neighborhoods, then parents can start talking about and trying to figure out what their comfort level is about carpooling, all of that type of stuff to try and get the kids to the school.
Well, and I think that's exactly why we wanted to bring that up tonight, because obviously the next school committee meeting isn't for a little while to start with, and it'd be a little too late in the conversation, but if again, the guidelines and the guidance stays exactly the way it is today, the only way Foxborough Public Schools could transport is to use the 2-mile rule. Other than that, we won't be able to do it. We
That's
just
if we're
can't.
all in. If we were in a hybrid model, that's a different story.
Hybrid model, we could basically, if it's a 50-50, you can make it work, obviously, because you've just, reduced everything at 50%, which is about what the 2-mile thing does. So it's very close. But that's our issue, and it's not, like I said, it's not, this is probably one of the first times we're gonna start to see the negative of not having those 2 extra buses from the CIP this year, because now we're very limited too on what we have for excess buses. And we're very concerned now if we have breakdowns, because we don't have that strong backup of equipment, so.
We also don't have that extra mechanic because that was taken out of the budget
Right.
as well.
Right, so there's some concerns here, relative to the whole process working, but, there is virtually no way of making the 1-mile radius work, from a transportation point of view, and getting everybody to school at the same time so that they can participate at the same time.
The final guidance on transportation has not come out in calls that we've had with the commissioner, whether there will be any relief to that or not, that is still remains a question. But at this point in time, as Bill said, it's standing at the 3-foot mark.
Yeah, so, and the way that works on a 3-foot, if you think about a bus, so most bus seats for elementary are basically made so 3 elementary kids could sit on it. But if you think about it, you would put in the first row, the child would be at the window. The one on the other side would be at at least at the aisle side, and then it rotates back and forth. And that's why the 3-foot distance does work on the bigger buses. We are very fortunate on our smaller buses, which service our special needs community, is that we don't typically have more on those buses than what we'd be allowed to have. So we're working okay. I will also say the advantage we've had in having our ESY program actually running is we are transporting kids right now, and we are actually running schools right now. So we're getting that ability to understand, how much are we going through from amount of wipes and things of that nature based on that smaller population. How is our transportation going? And I will say, everything I've heard from both the Director of Student Services and from my transportation is that the kids have been great. They're wearing their masks. There haven't been any issues. This tends to be one of our more challenging populations relative to just having those physical controls, and we're having no issues at all. So I think that's a real positive, that everybody seems to be on board and understanding why we're doing what we're doing, and it has been working out well. So as Amy said, with the amount of materials we've backed ourselves up with, we're still very comfortable that we've got what we're going to need to make this thing work. So. And we continue to order. We're not stopping. We're kind of making sure that we have it there. So.
So when would we need a decision on this transportation? I mean,
Well, if the guidance stays exactly where it is, you're
do we
going
have
to have
to amend our
to.
school committee policy? Is it in our policy manual? The 1 mile versus 2 miles? I know it's the law, but
I believe that it is in our
I
policy.
think we do. Yeah.
We just did that, right, Rich?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, we worked on that in the fall.
And if we have to amend the policy, it could be a short-term amendment to address this specific set of circumstances for as long as we're required to do this. And just keeping in mind, I know it would be a tremendous hardship for a lot of people. I myself would be, if my kids were in elementary school, I'm right at 2 miles, so I know that I would, fall within it. And I know I have neighbors who have elementary school students who will now, have to get them to school as opposed to picking up the bus at the end of our street. But, at the end of the day, transportation is not something that we are required by law to provide to our parents have to remember that this is not, we're not required to do this by law. This is something that we have taken on as a district and willingly. I mean, we have great transportation services, and I think we're in much better shape, frankly, than other towns that had to pay for private transportation contracts during this school closure. You know, we have good people on our buses. I trust our bus drivers to get our kids safely to and from school, to make sure they're wearing their masks, to recognize if someone looks sick or is, you know, in need of assistance, and make sure that child gets the assistance they need. We have really good people in town, but you know, it is something you just need to acknowledge as parents, that this is something that we provide. It's a service that we provide as a community, but it isn't something we're required to by law.
Right.
So if we have to make a hard decision, it would be a short-term decision.
Hopefully.
But we'll see. Maybe they'll back off some of this.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Sooner we know, the better.
The other, just a couple of the smaller subcommittees that I mentioned before we get to academics and teaching and learning and remote learning plan that's in development. Under our auxiliary subcommittee that's been meeting weekly, that includes extended day, athletics, music, et cetera. So we're still, as far as music, the conversation at the state level, is it still, is it okay if you're 6 to 12 feet? All of this comes down to distance and depending on what we're talking about, what activity. So that is still under discussion. When we think about wearing masks in orchestra and having students spaced, Cammie's done so much work in measuring, and we're fine with that spacing and meeting. And then it comes to when we think about, this is your world, as far as when we get into woodwinds and brass instruments and band and the distancing there, and chorus as well.
Outdoor space? Could we use
You can use
space?
outdoor space, we can use the auditorium, we can spread students out that way, and so we're using multiple spaces, like in the Ahern, thinking about room 155, which is a really large room. So I don't have an answer on band chorus at this point in time, but as far as for classes and those things, can we space out? Yes, but it's still under discussion at the state level. For chorus, as an example, for the 6 to 12 feet. When we think of athletics, we're still waiting on athletics. Not to put you on the spot, but there's no decisions that are made.
PE and locker rooms and things of that nature? What's that?
You know, as far as with being in our wellness classes, that's a 14-foot spread. As far as students, we can do that. We can have them in our gyms. We have 2 gyms at the Ahern. They're non-contact. Does it change some of our lesson plans?
Of course, yeah.
Absolutely. But can we do it and space them out 14 feet? Yes. Yes, we can. So, and then extended day, different practices as an example. It's not so much the morning when students come in, it's the afternoon when they all come together. So, but we can space out where typically we have them all come together at once. We take the group leaders and they're spaced out with their groups. So again, extended day is on that particular subcommittee, and looking at, well, what does that look like in the morning? What does it look like in the afternoon? The same as with all of the principals we're working about, you know, arrival time and dismissal, and you're moving, so it's not the congregating, which is different. The technology subcommittee, we're really fortunate with our technology department getting out there with the order, because you're hearing many districts, they've placed orders for devices and they're not going to see them till October. We know that right now, the estimated date of delivery is August 25th. We would prefer for it to be earlier. That's to land in New Jersey. They have to be imaged. But then
July 25th.
August
Delivery,
25th.
and then coming up to here from.
August 25th.
August 25th is landing in New Jersey. And then they have to be imaged. But we have a number on site, at least for staff, to get all of the training with our staff. But for students, because what will happen in the fall with students with their devices, K to 4, the devices, unless we're remote or hybrid, they will stay in the classrooms assigned to the teachers. But grades 5 through 12, the devices will be assigned to the student, and they will go home each day with the
In the
student.
event we're remote, though, they'll all go home.
In the event that we're remote or hybrid, they'll all go home with all of our students. And they're really, I don't have the specs right now as far as the devices themselves, but they're really rugged. They, 3-year warranties that will come with them. They're touch screen, so students will be able, when we think about math and science and being able to write on them, even with a number 2 pencil, they'll be able to do that on the screen.
They're not Chromebooks, they are laptops.
Yeah,
I've gotten that question a lot.
Yeah, and that's a very important point. We chose not to go the Chromebook solution, which basically is really an internet-only device. We chose to go with a device that we felt could enhance our teaching and learning abilities and be a little bit more robust in its overall thing. Plus, by having staff and students having the same devices, whatever the teacher sees, the student sees. So there's no, question about looking your top right-hand corner, are you both seeing the same thing? Versus having multiple different options that way. So, and quite honestly, based on our technology department's ability to, source negotiate, the pricing was very similar to that of a Chromebook, which is kind of scary that other people haven't figured that out as well. So, made a lot more sense.
And the one last thing I'll say, and then toss it over to Allison, when we think about something that we heard from our families through remote learning is the common platform and not being able to see certain things. So by having Microsoft Teams as the common platform, we will have videos that will be tutorials for parents, because as an example, if we think about the learning plans that were accessible on the website, so you could look and see in a week's time what was happening if you had a middle schooler, that's the overall, kind of the skeleton, if you will. A parent doesn't have the access to get into a student's Microsoft account to see what's in Teams, but they didn't realize that. So by us doing a video for parents to explain that, I think we'll go really far when we're talking about, well, this is what you should be able to see. This is what your students are doing. Any questions, please contact the teacher. But as much as we can front load that in the fall, we will do that with different video tutorials and communications.
Before we move on to academics, I
Yes.
just had a couple more questions for Mr. Gutman on facilities. I had someone ask about the ventilation systems in the schools. Can you speak to that? Are there any concerns about our schools' ventilation?
I'm not going to say there's no concerns, but we are, with most of our buildings, the air basically has a fresh air intake requirement. So we control through automated systems how much fresh air comes in through all of the air conditioning systems. Even the older schools that have the unit ventilators on the outside walls, those all have automatic dampering systems that we set to how much fresh air comes in. So we get the air exchanges. Every building has been renovated during the time frame in which that fresh air requirement was out there. It's changed in how much you have to generate, but the devices were all capable of doing whatever. So, and we do control it. Obviously, typically we wouldn't open it up as much in the winter time because you're heating outside air to do it. In this particular environment, we'll have to basically open them up and keep them a little higher than we normally would. It's interesting, and I was explaining this earlier, that, even buildings like within the high school, when we did the renovation there, even things that were closet areas have return air. Well, if you have a return air, you obviously automatically have what has to be fresh air coming back in to replace. So while there are some areas that we're using now that weren't intended to be true offices or true classroom type things, the minimum requirement is air coming in. We meet that. If you're concerned about it at all and you leave the door open, you're getting the air through the intake based on the return air being sucked out of the room. So I think, with the Ahern being relatively new, in the last 20 years, it meets all those requirements. Obviously, the borough is going to meet them as we're moving through here. The first 9 classrooms will be 100% controlled that way, but the unit ventilators in the rest of the rooms are 100% that way. IGO has unit ventilators throughout. We maintain those things differently than they used to be. We take them apart every single summer. We go through all the motors and all the cleaning gear, and then we change filters on a regular basis. So something that wasn't normal maintenance practices previously has become normal in the last 5 to 8 years, where we do it in every single building throughout every single unit, and we have constant filtration changes. So we're pretty comfortable that we're meeting all of the guidance and all of the standards on that. And that we don't have any building that, quite honestly, just doesn't have that capability. We do have some rooms within, a few of the buildings that we do have that concern on, and we're gonna have to try to figure out where to move. And they're mostly in like a smaller area that's a makeup office, that doesn't have that capability. We're gonna have to figure out where to move those people to during this time frame. But there's only a few of those rooms, there's not a lot, so.
My other facilities question just has to do with the borough, because we have the added complication that we're in the middle of our renovation, or, we're proceeding. We have our site visit tomorrow, looking forward to it. The temporary classrooms that are going to be set up in the gym, those will all meet the space requirements, the 3-foot distance. We don't have any concerns.
They're larger than regular classrooms.
Yeah.
So they're not-
Okay, just for the public, I wanted to make sure that got out there as well, because,
Well,
it's
ki-
complicated.
It's kind of fortunate we did what we did,
Yeah.
because if we had rented the portable classrooms, they would have been smaller.
Right.
There would have been no way to
Yeah.
do this. So the
That's
fact that
right.
we took the gymnasium, left it empty, and the reality is, it will have all of the new ventilation systems.
Yeah.
So while all the regular ventilation is up there for when it becomes a gym, everything was run straight down from those into each of these
Right.
classrooms.
The
direct
temporary
ducted
classrooms.
into every classroom. So both the pre-K 3 classrooms and the 6 in the gym actually will be with air conditioning and everything at this point in time as we start the school off. But again, the rest of the classrooms, the other 12 or so that will be active, basically have the exterior, because they're all exterior walls, they're all exterior classrooms, not only have windows, but also have unit ventilators on the outside walls that bring air in.
Yep.
So we should be fine there.
Thank you. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thanks for the question.
I
I'm
had.
going to go to Brent, because Brent,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
thank you.
Go, Brent.
No, I was curious about, especially with, we talked about it in other groups here, but with younger kids, the masks can be an issue, especially if we're seeing facial expressions. Is that something that's been part of the committee's discussions in terms of face shields and mask windows and things of that nature?
And thanks to ESY, this summer, we have a solution with where we have the clear opening so you can see. Why don't we jump to you?
We've been using them in the summer program.
How's it been going?
It's been going very well, except that we discovered that they fog up.
Yep.
So it was great to have someone there who had prior experience. One of our nurses had the experience of, you can treat them with shaving cream or Dawn dish detergent, and that will prevent them from fogging up in the future. So it was great to learn that lesson now before we start the school year, before we distribute them.
But the mask, at least at this point, the guidance on the mask, the face shield, does not cover, what the mask actually does.
No,
Because
you can't have an open.
because it can still
Right,
move.
correct.
Right, so while people will wear masks and wear a shield for different reasons, it's not the substitute.
Yeah, so
So
it would really be
Correct.
the mask.
the mask is the requirement, the shield is just an added level if someone chooses to use it.
So just to jump in, just as an example too, that we're talking about when, there's a concern with labs at the high school and the middle school when students are working in close proximity. So conversation with the Board of Health this morning. If they have gloves, if they have a mask, and if they have goggles, they're comfortable because they're not going to meet for more than 15 minutes. So if you're into a smaller group and you have those 3 things, they're comfortable with that being your complete, because explaining even what in the healthcare, that's even more than what they
Right.
would have.
Eliminating those.
Then, so that way you can still have your hands-on labs and those kinds of things.
That was going to be one of my questions.
In a modified way, but yes.
Yeah. Do you have anything more, Brent?
Michelle?
Okay. So that, kind of going along with that theme, was if a student wants to have a face shield in addition to a mask, is that something that is at least discussed to be acceptable?
If they want to bring in a face shield and have that on top of a mask, yes.
Okay.
We're not purchasing shields for students.
No, that was not my question.
Yeah.
But it's just more about, for some people's comfort level. And the other thought, as you were talking about with cafeteria and trying to figure that out, has it been looked at for high school, having some outdoor options for eating lunch?
We've talked about other spaces besides the cafeteria, yes, because we do have the outdoor patio area that's right by the high school cafeteria. So those are all in discussion as well.
Okay,
Which is actually used now, so
does that make
that's
sense?
not
Yeah.
something new, yeah.
Yeah. And I think I was looking at just movement of kids, especially in the younger, if they're staying in the classrooms, is that something that the teachers are talking about, of how to figure out how to have kids be moving? They can't move around from classroom to classroom, but I would expect that sitting for such a long period of time is going to be an issue. And especially for kids who need movement quite a bit to learn. So I'm sure that you guys are talking about the challenges.
I think that's a perfect segue, actually, to the teaching subcommittee that Allison's leading.
And I will say, that's not really, I wasn't going to talk about that specifically, but I will mention that one of the first things we did, because we know, especially at the elementary levels, the rug space is such an important part of the day, particularly with our responsive classroom program, our opening morning meeting and our closing circle, measuring off to see how many students we can fit on the rug, and then there is an opportunity taping off where kids could bring their seats. So there will be that movement between the seat and the rug, but everybody would have to be facing in the same direction. It would be the same sort of thing. But yes, we have been exploring that because we know we take movement breaks now and we're not even in that situation. So there will have to be opportunities for movement and for mask breaks. So that logistical piece is obviously important, but we've been heavily focused on the teaching and learning components because one of the biggest challenges, which I'm sure is obvious to everybody here, is how do we plan for a robust in-person learning experience while at the same time knowing we need to build the capacity of our teachers and our students and our parents for possibly remote or hybrid learning. We need to have those skills ready to go. So that has really been in the forefront of our mind, and there has been a lot of ongoing professional development opportunities for teachers this summer. I mentioned them last time with our self-service professional development website. What I didn't really break down last time were all the categories of professional development that are on that website. So there's a whole section on the Microsoft tools, 365, Teams, and there's a feedback portal for teachers, and I'm seeing a lot of comments about, I discovered this great tool in Teams to do X. I discovered this great thing in 365 that I didn't know I could do. I discovered this great translation tool that I can use. Obviously, in the forefront of our mind, too, are our EL students and our special education students, and making sure that we can best accommodate their needs, whether we are in person or remote. And they're our highest priority, just as an aside, to be in person as much as possible because we're most concerned. That being said, aside from that 365 tab, there is a tab on social justice, there is a tab on book studies, there's a tab on remote learning hacks, like how do you build engagement in a remote learning environment? How do you create motivation for students? How do you do collaborative group work? All of those things that we know happen so seamlessly within the in-person context, and were not so possible in an emergency situation, but could be possible in a planned, proactive situation if we build our capacity. There's a whole section on that. There's a whole section on related books. Speaking of which, this book just came out, and there are 3 very respected authors in the field, Doug Fisher, Nancy Fry, and John Hattie, and it's called The Distance Learning Playbook, K-12, Teaching for Engagement and Impact in Any Setting, and that's exactly what we want to happen. Regardless of the setting we're in, we want the impact of our teaching learning to feel as close to as in-person as possible. We know it can't be the same, but we also know there are specific strategies that we can employ to make it more parallel. So I'll be launching tomorrow a book study district-wide for anybody who wants to opt in to participate in this. We will be doing an elementary group, a middle school group, and a high school group because obviously the conversations will have relevance that's specific to the levels. You're actually hearing this first. I wanted to press send today and it didn't get out in time before this meeting. So we're excited. We were able to get our hands on copies of this book, and I know there's an appetite for learning. I know I said that at the last school committee. Our teachers have communicated they want training on technology now, not at the end of August, right as we're getting back. So along that line, I've been meeting with my subcommittees, also an elementary subcommittee, middle school subcommittee, high school subcommittee, to think about how we can do some lunch and learn style training or some just-in-time training. So at the elementary level, for example, we are going to do a train the trainer model because we know they are the only group that's using FPS online classroom, which is also affectionately known as Buzz Learning. We have a plan for them where we could possibly catalog some small, some mini lessons, some video mini lessons, so that we could be ahead of the game. So if we ever went out, it would be there. And then we'd be able to do the live instruction small group through our WebEx platform. But we need to train teachers better on how to build the content in Buzz. So that's coming up. We have one training on July 30th and one August 6th, I believe. At the middle school and high school levels, that training will be more tailored towards departments, because one of the biggest frustrations that parents dealt with, but that's not going to change for teachers, is the use of different tools. Because if I'm a science teacher, I need different tools than if I'm an English teacher. And so how do we streamline that for parents, but at the same time continue to build proficiency for teachers? So one way is we are planning to implement a single sign-on service, so that when students log in, let's say I'm a student and I'm in 5th grade, and I use Lexia, I use STEM Scopes, I use Redbird, I use ConnectEd, they'll be on my dashboard. So I'll have to sign in once, and then I click the button. That will be a huge relief to parents, I think, and a huge relief to students. We're very excited about that. And at the same time, we're cognizant of not compromising the teacher capacity that they've built. Maybe they've gotten really good at Padlet or Edpuzzle or whatever. We don't want to rip that away. I mean, we want to go to a certain degree, say, okay, these are your primary tools, so that every student and family has a similar experience. But at the same time, we don't want to take away the capacity they've built. They have it figured out to use X, Y, and Z, but how can we make it easier? So that PD will be tailored for them. One of the other things is with students all having, and this sort of, it's a related point to what you said, Michelle, with students having laptops, it's a game changer in the classroom. We don't want to have the technology sitting on the shelf for when we go out. We want to be able to integrate it into our daily routine so that everyone's sort of building that muscle as we go, because there's just not endless time for professional development here or training for kids. And what we don't want it to be is turn on your computer now and for the next half hour we're going to do X. We want it to be, you know what, it's hard for us to collaborate in a small group right now because we have to sit this way. So you guys are going to be a group on your computer using Teams or whatever it is, and they can still collaborate on a project that way together. So that'll be a shift, and teachers need time to plan for that. One of the things I think is important, we can't expect teachers to come out of the gate and be perfect at this. They're going to need time. I mean, usually change in education is so much slower than this, and we're trying to throw as many opportunities as we can at them, being respectful of the fact that it's summer, and then they're not obligated to do that now, and then also plan in the August days when they will be here, and how do we maximize that opportunity? We are trying to think about, like, what are the must-have tools that every teacher needs proficiency with, and we know one of them will be WebEx because we haven't used it yet, and that will be a huge piece for us in terms of being able to deliver sort of that synchronous component that we wanted. I have the subcommittee every week so that we can continue to get ideas from the teachers. Like, one of the things that has come up that's in the forefront of my mind is people worrying about regression, including parents. How do you start the year with an assessment without making it feel like you're hammering kids with tests the minute they come back to school when they've been out for 6 months, and we have to think about SEL. So one of the tabs on the PD site is SEL, and how do you deal with regression? And there's podcasts that people are listening to, and there's webinars that they're attending. And they're giving feedback to us so that we can say to other people, if this is an area you're worried about, go to this podcast, go to this webinar, have a book study about XYZ. So we have strategic plans about when will we implement the assessments, how will we look at the data, how will we make adjustments to our instruction based on that. I said a lot. It's ongoing. Obviously, we don't have all the answers yet, but the teachers, the department heads, the curriculum directors, the teachers that I've been involved with, the administrators, everybody is bringing their best ideas to the table. There's a lot of iterations that are going to continue to happen. And there's a lot of learning that everybody is going to need to do. And in some cases, we're going to expand tools that we've used. Like, there's one at the middle school called Zingy Learning. It's specifically for science. We used to use it in 5 and 8, around MCAS years. They're going to expand that out, use it across the whole middle school so that we can identify some of those gaps and maybe, get kids ahead of things like that. So small things that teachers bring up or a department head brings up that we can then expand. So I think that's good it's a big subcommittee, so there's a lot to talk about. Sorry if I went too long, Richard.
Quick, yeah.
Yeah, I know that in other parts of the country, in another 2 weeks, there are schools that are going to be in, having made a decision about which way they're going forward. Are there any districts or states that we're looking at to see what they're trying that may be successful here? Just to add that on all the top of other things that you're looking at, but have we identified?
I think what we've seen is the commissioner has asked districts not to come out and make any decisions until early August with plans. You've seen a couple of districts come out and they've talked about because of
Yes.
overcrowding, there's
Yeah.
no way that they can be
Right.
in person. So we're looking at that, and I would say we're looking at all of that.
But I
we'll
will say, on the
continue.
local level, and I know you mentioned this, it's not the people going back in 2 weeks, but there's constant discussion
Right.
across the Commonwealth about, we're going to do this, or we're going to try this, or we're thinking this, and then people going back and forth. So that part's helpful.
Right.
But I'll just say, and I know that our timing is so off, the last thing I'll say is that we're going to continue with these conversations in the next, obviously, the 2 weeks right now. The plan that we have is more informative, that's due to the Department of Education on the 31st. It's non-binding. As far as a final decision, they want that by August 10th, but at the same time, it's always, everything is, fluid, could change. So we have to keep in mind that we have to be flexible as well. And we're taking survey data from parents and looking at that too, as far as their intent to return students.
So thank you. I want to recognize your question, but we have a hard stop and we got a couple things to do, so I want to make sure we kind of fly as fast as we can.
Okay. Can you talk about who's on the committee? I know it's a big committee, but like what kind of?
This one, that's the Subcommittee of Teaching and Learning. So
Got a lot of committees going. I was just wondering, like, who are you tapping to get on, get all these voices in?
I would say the teacher working group committee, which we have these other subcommittees that have started first. Theirs doesn't start till next week, and it's representative of elementary, middle, and high school. It will be regular ed, special ed teachers, and specialists on those. But these subcommittees have all been department heads, curriculum directors, principals, assistant principals,
Tech integration
tech
specialists.
integration specialist,
And
central
then
office.
food service, like all the
food service,
related
all of
service
those.
people.
It's a lot of planning to do. I'm just wondering if are there plans, is your vision with plans in the upcoming weeks to then roll that out to PTOs and other parent groups and things of that nature? Or what would be the ideal timeline on that?
I think sharing it with our preliminary plans on the 31st, when we have that, it will be early August. But at the same time, you can't, you have to be able to plan with all of the people that are in the schools doing the work. But as far as communication, I've sent out 3 communications in just the last week, so we'll continue to send out communications and collect feedback too.
One last thing, and I know, Richard, we don't have time, so I apologize, but the wellness came up and the phys ed, and I just want to say that from our department head on my subcommittee, she said the focus is really going to be on fitness and mental health and things that they can do without as much equipment so that they could turn on a dime and continue to do those things at home. And I actually think that's important. So sorry, I forgot to mention that.
Thank you.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I know we are running short on time, and I know we want to give full attention to both the operating protocols and our school committee functions and responsibilities documents. I think we need to have another meeting prior, maybe even to submission of the plans. Perhaps we should use our available time to address the food service pricing and set a new meeting date, maybe even for next week.
So I was going to suggest the same, and maybe 2 dates, actually.
Yeah, I think so.
So I think I would recommend that we skip over the operating protocols and the functions and responsibilities, get to the food service and the donations, and then quickly set a couple dates to go forward. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm just going to do one quick summary. Thank you for the update, the very detailed update. Thank you to all the teachers and department heads that are part of this day in and day out and hourly work. Thank you to the business office for all the detailed looking at just the functions, and certainly the curriculum piece, and then everything else too. So it's a pretty special place we're all in right now, and we're very fortunate that the school professionals are deeply engaged in that. And these updates have been very helpful because we're trying to cover the bases. And thank you to the school personnel for doing it. Thank you. Okay, so okay with everyone to skip the next 2 items and good? Okay, and we'll set the date after that. So food service pricing, can we jump to that? Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, in conversations with Janice Watt, our food service director, I asked her to put together the letter that you all have in your file here. The last time we asked for a review or an increase in the pricing was July of 2017. At that time, we did a 25-cent increase. The reality is that, we try not to do these, obviously, on a regular basis, even though we do have increases in both material cost and labor cost. But at this point, and partially because of obviously the effects of COVID-19 on, what we've incurred in costs this year, we are assuming that we're going to have even more cost involved in the coming years, or in the coming fall. So what we're looking at is a 25-cent increase to bring elementary up to $3, middle school and high school up to $3.25, breakfast is up to $1.75, and then the adult meals would be $4.50. We did do a little study of our neighboring towns, which we typically do just to make sure it's nothing strange. And as you can see, what we're requesting puts us right at about the average of those towns. So while there are some that will be above us, there's only a few that would be below us. And I think that's, we're all facing the exact same things. While we don't go through the same type of audits we used to do on the federal government relative to pricing, they still have guidance that they have targeted prices on the national side, and you can see we're still, in general sense, right around where that number is as well. So the federal government does get very concerned whether, based on what they're giving you for a balance, which they're paying about $3.25 right now a meal, that if you're actually charging others less, that they're supplementing, if you will, the overall cost of the program. So by keeping it relatively in check, when you do get in their audits, you're basically held pretty much harmless because you've done what you should do. So again, we're never looking to push along increases as far as what we've done in this district, but it is a kind of a fact of where we are right now. I will give Janice and her team a lot of credit. They, as you know, did a lot of work this spring relative to families in need, and providing meals anywhere from 120 to almost 200 a day, for 7 days a week. And but again, that came at a cost to us as well. Federal government did a great job as far as funding a lot of the material side of it, but we still had a labor cost that and this is a self-funded, non-taxpayer paid base. So this is not something that's part of our operating budget where we're putting money into it to support the food service. They are, what they bring in revenue has to totally cover all of their cost. So that's why the request is here.
Thank you. A motion from anyone?
I'd be happy to make a motion to approve the requested meal price increase for the 2020-2021 school year.
Second by Brent. Any further discussion? All in favor? 5-0. Thank you very much. Donations. Always great to get those.
Yes, so we have a donation by the Foxborough Soccer Club, and that is for a 5-pack with bag, mannequin, 6 feet tall, free kick. I don't do soccer, so I'm not really well-versed. I will be completely honest there.
You read
And
the
then a weighted
description
rubber
very well.
base for a free kick mannequin trainer as well.
They're really nice.
It's great for social distancing of the goalie. So now we can just kick at the social distance goalie and there's no one around.
They're very useful.
So free kick is always good, right? But that generous donation for $1,293.90 from the Foxborough Soccer Club.
I make a motion that we accept with gratitude the donation of $1,293.90 for the Uber trainers, free kick trainers.
I will second that motion.
Second by Tina. Any further discussion? All in favor? 5-0 with gratitude. Thank you very much. Great, so those are the agenda items. I think we're good for the agenda items, everyone, right? So looking forward to possibly a couple dates. I think we might need a couple. So possibly a date to discuss the 2 items we've just skipped over, and then possibly another date in advance of August 10th. Is that correct? Is there any interest in the next 2 Mondays?
I could do the next
I'm just throwing them out there because they both fit in. Next Monday is the 27th, and then one after that is the 3rd, and we could probably plan on, well, I'm just throwing Mondays out, so I'm open. I mean,
I'm fine with whatever. I was gonna ask Dr. Bertos, Dr. Mello.
yeah, any suggestions from?
If there's, is there a date or date that's gonna be more impactful for you all?
I can't do next Monday evening, I'm committed already. That's the only, the other one I could do. I'm sorry?
Can we come along?
So one
not
of the
even a
things
fun
we've
thing.
done with our goals, that's been a workshop, so it hasn't been at your typical, 7 o'clock time. It's working through our goals, and the protocols are the norms that we came up with, what we all agreed to.
If it was at 5 o'clock, I could do it. I have something at 7.
If we ended up having a workshop to kind of get through the goals,
I would do that.
we could do that. And
We
then-
could even do like 5 o'clock again, a workshop at 5 o'clock.
That would work.
To get through the goals and the protocols, maybe next week at 5?
I'm fine with that.
I can do that.
You good? Sound good? Okay, that's a
Yes.
good, so we got the 3rd at 5. The 27th, sorry, 7/27 at 5 PM. And then, is the 3rd a good date to support you as the plan is?
That's going to be with the preliminary, informational plan that's submitted on the 31st, to turn that around and have it for the 3rd. That's going to be tight. If there's a way to move it and where it's not on a Monday night, to give us a couple more days, that would be helpful.
That's what I
Yeah,
was most curious about.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm fine moving it on to the day.
We want to be efficient
Yes.
and not put more pressure on
Right,
you.
but we need this room because we do want that televised.
That one you would definitely want
Right.
televised.
So we need to confirm, is there some time during that week that this room is available? I don't have any challenges with any night that week, but I think that would, personally, I don't know if anybody else does.
Do you want to, can we set that date at the next meeting, after we do some research on rooms? Can we set that date next meeting?
Sure.
I would want to try and set it sooner, or at least potential dates, to make sure that we're available.
We typically have selectmen in here on Tuesdays, so possibly Wednesday or
Yeah,
Thursday.
Wednesday or Thursday, the 5th or the 6th.
I think planning board meets on Thursday, but typically the advisory committee is Wednesday, and they're not meeting
and they're
this
not
time of
televised.
year, so Wednesday night might be our best bet, would just be my guess.
So would you like to pencil in the 5th?
We still have to
Wednesday
check.
the 5th? We still have to check?
You're like an
Right, and we could also pick
And
another
Chris-
day, and just in case.
At 7 o'clock, Wednesday the 5th at 7?
Does that help
Does that
you?
help breathing?
That helps you. Yeah, it does.
Thank you.
Is that enough time?
Is that enough?
By then, we'll have the plan, and we also know that whatever we're submitting by the 10th is, things could change. So let's say we
Okay.
we have to keep that in mind. If we say we're all in person, and then we come back and it's a matter of the governor's come out and said no, like, you're gonna have to turn, that's why we have to have
Yep.
3
Got it.
models
Yeah.
ready.
And the school committee approval part of it is from the budgetary standpoint, because there is an impact. It's not from the administrative standpoint.
Correct.
That's still your job and your role.
All of our-
The approval part is from the budget and the policy.
Yes.
And we would be targeting.
And it could be calendar, let me
Yes.
just, that last piece.
Yes.
Because
That too.
it could impact, one of the things as far as the discussion is, if they reduce the year for students to 177 days from 180, to give more time for staff, for training, and to be prepared for students to come in. That is a conversation, we've not heard back on that, but it could be a calendar change, so that's important, because that's under school committee.
Right.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay, good. So we got a plan.
all right.
Next Monday, and then,
Okay.
Thank you for being
Okay.
flexible.
motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second by Brent. All in favor to adjourn? Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.